What's up, everybody? It's your boy Tyler, Mom's Basement MMA. I have a very special guest with me today. His name is Dr. Timothy Little. He is a clinical psychologist, and we are here to really talk about the mental side of fighting. Fighting is such a brutally vicious sport. It is incredibly taxing, but it's also a thinking man's game. I wanted to bring in a psychologist to really kind of process and unpack some of the mental elements of this game. So, first and foremost, Dr. Tim, thank you so much for being here. I was hoping you could introduce yourself and tell my audience a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Ty. I appreciate it, man. It's an honor to be on the show, longtime watcher. And yeah, I'm excited to be here, man. Very, very excited. I got my PhD at the University of Nebraska in clinical psychology. I have been kind of in and out of several aspects of kind of not quite performance, but as far as finding the peak of what people are looking for in themselves. And that's kind of the realm I kind of cover with a variety of other research and clinical experiences and so forth. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm about.
Well, I appreciate you spending some of your afternoon with me. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring you in is access to mental health services. They're not readily available, but we
Yeah.
hear about these fighters that are competing at the highest level, and they all have
hmm
something in common. They
hmm
are typically working with a mental health professional behind the scenes to
Right.
get the best performance out of them as possible. I'm hoping what we can get out of this interview today is for me to just hit on some general themes, some things that I hear from fighters. Hopefully, we could use this as a resource to help people
hmm
pre-fight anxiety. These
hmm
fights, they're a pressure cooker environment. You have eight fighters in the back room. They're all getting ready. You hear that rumble of the crowd. You hear that music, and then the hooting and hollering of the crowd. And then the guy that was warming up right next to you, he's walking back in the locker room. He's all battered and beaten and bloodied. And it's like that scene from Gladiator, right?
Yeah, I
Where
was
it's
just gonna
like
say
you're
that.
getting ready to like go out.
Yeah.
And
This
I
guy's
so
pissing down his leg next to you. Yeah, 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 yeah. The guy's
exactly.
shaking in
So
his shield.
I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you a little bit, like, what are some basic techniques for somebody who's never worked with a mental health professional,
Yeah.
somebody who's getting ready to make that walk for the very first time? What are some things, what are some coping mechanisms or skills that fighters could potentially leverage to help ebb the stressful environment that they find themselves in?
A couple of things to consider. When you like you had just described, there are some massive peaks and major valleys in fighting, and that is kind of counterintuitive to a good mental health, really. So if you think about these like valleys and peaks, what I would suggest for people is to what's called it's a term referred to as it's referred to as equanimity. Okay, that's a fancy word that means I keep my emotions in a certain range of extreme. I don't ever get too high for very long, and I don't get too low for very long. If you could find that middle ground, it's at least helpful in getting the most out of your performance. And what I mean by like keeping your emotions within a certain range, some of those things you can do, to be honest, is building space in your mind. And what I mean by that is sitting in silence. And I know people think, oh, is this kumbaya meditation? Well, what it is it focuses, it clears your mind so that you don't have these anxiety thoughts that stack on top of each other that can really feel overwhelming. What it is focusing on what are my core values? Can I visualize what I ultimately want to do? Do I believe in myself? And let's not let my anxiety waver my confidence because confidence and mental aspects are, I don't know, 85% of going into that ring. So keeping not too high and not too low, that includes when you win and you get the results you want. If you blow up in your mind, oh, I'm undefeated, I'm this badass, I'm going to be 10 and 0. We have to not get too high for too long because we can get lost in the emotion. And that's what I see a lot of my clients throughout these years do is they get lost in the ups and get lost in the downs. What we want to do is recognize when things are going well, understand what those thoughts and feelings and behaviors are, accepting those. Same with those that you don't get that result. I lost. I got my ass kicked. My nose broke. My knees hurt. Whatever. And thinking I'll never recover. This, that, and the other. When we get lost in those thoughts, it really can be damaging to our performance and our mental health long term. Because fighting is a temporary slice of life. And now we're trying to build skills in the fighting game that you can carry out of the fighting game as well. One of those things is equanimity.
You're getting into a theme that I think is super important. It's how we unpack, look back at these fights, good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of these things because of the brutal nature of this game. It's like you're only as
Mm-hmm.
good as your last fight. You could have had a
Yeah.
wonderful camp. You could have
Yeah.
done all the things. You could have put in all the hours, ran all the miles, lost the
Mm-hmm.
weight. Everything looked great except the result at the end of the night. And so many fighters, I feel like they tear themselves down after that. Like, none of everything was shit. The past 3 months was shit. I got nothing out of it. I didn't get the result I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, you said, don't get into the valleys.
Don't
Don't
get
let
lost in the
yourself
valleys. Mm-hmm.
don't sink down. But yet, like
Mm-hmm.
that rumination's there, right? We do one of these things. We get on our phones. Everyone on Instagram has something to say to us. We didn't
Yeah.
get the result. There are a bunch of news articles with our names in the headlines, panning our performance.
Yep.
What are some things that fighters could do to maybe mitigate some of the pressures of social media and all of the noise that happens around some of these fights, especially if the performance didn't go according to plan?
I think it's important for fighters to understand that just because you didn't have the performance or find the result that you wanted, that isn't tied to your value as a person. And that is so easy to forget because of the media, because of the pressure and the coaching and the all of the aspects of fighting that kind of go along with it. I mean, it can be brutal. And another thing to consider for fighters is when you don't get the result or the performance you don't want, and you start to become hard on yourself, we have to be very, very careful with that technique because I've seen my clients do this to themselves. And what ultimately happens is it pulls them further away from their ultimate goal. And they think, oh, if I'm hard on myself, if I quote unquote kick my own ass by being an asshole to myself, like you fucked up or you really messed this up, God, you really need to do better. You need to be stronger, better striking, better grappling, better jujitsu, whatever the case is. I would like every fighter to ask themselves a couple of questions when they're being that hard on themselves. Number one question to ask when you're being that hard on yourself and you're punishing yourself day in and day out, week in, week out, is that helpful to you? When you punish yourself and you put yourself on the rack and you stretch and you just, it's a torture almost. And you ask yourself, is that helping me get to where I want to go? For some people, that answer is yes. Potentially, for majority of people, including majority of fighters, it will actually pull you further away from your ultimate goal and your performance. When you get lost in punishing yourself, and it's all of a sudden you're not even on your own team. You're not even in your own corner. God, I'm so shitty. I can't believe I didn't check that kick and blah. You can get lost in that.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't help you get to where you ultimately want to go. So you have to think, what is my core values, right? And you think about those core values, and then you think in those core values, I want to be athletic. I want to be a performer, a fighter, and whatnot. And when I torture myself by not getting the results I want, or I'm mad at my own performance, understand that the more you torture yourself for a longer amount of time, it can lead to really deep clinical depressions. It can heighten that anxiety and it can have a ton of dysfunction when it comes to the performance side of fighting. So ask yourself, when I say all that shit to myself, is that helping me? Yes or no? And then you have this list of evidence that you can try to show yourself, like, okay, prove to myself that my belief that my fight was terrible, that means I'm a bad fighter. Overall, I'm a bad person. Well, you don't have evidence that suggests that.
Mm-hmm.
So don't go too far down that road because it's not helping you. It's about equanimity, living congruently with your values and thinking through what do I need as a person? What are things that I'm missing in my life that I need to have filled? And then how do I translate that into my physical performance? Again, and I'll try not to be too long-winded. People think that their mind and their body are separate. False. False. I go, just because I got to get my body ready for this fight. No, no, no. You got to get your mind and your body ready for this fight. And that includes post-fight.
Mm-hmm.
They're intrinsically linked, and we can't forget that. And that goes the same with pre-fight jitters. And I'll kind of go back to my first one. What are things that a fighter can do pre to get themselves to perform well? Number one, to keep that equanimity. And number two, to think through and visualize my performance. And three, overall, it's like, what's ultimately gonna help me? How can I find and shore up those things? How do I not torture myself into regressing? Because the more I torture myself, the further back I'm gonna ultimately be. And if I can't produce any evidence that's in line with, oh, I think a certain way, if I don't have any evidence to support that thought, then I know that's a junk thought. And
Mhm.
I know I need to trash that thought and think a different way because it's not helping me get to where I want to go.
Absolutely. Dr. Tam, I have one final question for you, and it's
Yeah.
simply this.
Hmm.
Let's say you go out there, the result is what it is. And I'm not going to really like have you qualify. This is what you should do if you get the result. This is what you shouldn't do if you don't get the result.
Sure.
I don't want to qualify it. Post fight, a week after the fight, you've gone over the good, the bad, and the ugly, whatever. You've processed the result. What are some things a mentally healthy fighter or somebody who's striving to become more mentally aware, what are some things that they could do to, like, yes, that had happened, but now it's time to move on and address the next thing? Like, are there some healthy things that people could have in mind or could strive for to like have a healthy break from that last performance to move on to other elements of their life, whether it's, you know, being a good mother, being a better partner, being a good employee, you know, a life outside of fighting? Like, I'd like you to comment on what people can do to kind of like get back into like some sort of like healthy balance or like living like a normal person.
I love that. And I think this is so critical because as you know, as many fighters as you've talked to, you know how imbalanced a fighter's life really is to the
Yes.
point where it's like jarring to other people to hear not just how little or any money or that are getting paid, but the amount of time and dedication it takes. And that's where things can go kind of sideways for people. So I like to think of life as this like kind of this big pie chart, right? And in that pie chart, if you have 85% of your life dedicated to fighting so you only have 15% left for being a husband, a mother, a brother, an uncle, or whatever you are. I mean, that's the balance that could be difficult to manage. So if you're going to have it unbalanced, we have to be careful to manage how long your life is going to be unbalanced like that. And if you can build a life around fighting that it remains unbalanced, you have to have family members, and partners that sign on that to know they're not available for X amount of months. So it's that open communication with everyone not associated with fighting in your family and friends that need to kind of understand that so they can fall in line and meet your expectations so there's not this big discord between you and your family. Now, what that means is I'd like to do with my clients is to draw up a pie chart and to have them tell me like how much of your day or how much of your week, Sunday to Sunday, are dedicated to certain things. And they write out kind of their day. And as you look through at it being written out for that week, you kind of can quantify how much time is being dedicated per pie slice of your life. And as you can kind of see how it shapes out, what you're looking for is not exactly equal slices, but you want slices that look semi-similar in size because if it's too unbalanced for too long, it can cause a ton of dysfunction. And if you don't communicate that well to your family and to your friends and to other non-fighters, it's going to make your position with them strained when you try to come back from the fighting world because no one's going to fight. No one, there's no Tom Brady's in the UFC. Okay. There's no 45-year-old. I mean, all
Relatively
respect to
speaking.
the natural. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All to Teixeira, relatively
Yeah.
speaking, it's incredibly rare that people fight for more than 20 years plus. So when you're done with that fight game, it's nice to have a clean exit into a family that has already understood the context of what your life was, and you're kind of giving them information. It's going to be unbalanced for this amount of time. And then build in those vacations. You have to. And I'm not saying spend money, vacation away from fighting,
Mm-hmm.
because fighting is typically not the only thing a person does in their life. And it's important to understand there are other elements of life that can actually help me as a fighter.
Right.
And if I find that balance and I keep my mind relatively clear and I follow my path and I visualize, I can make it happen. But again, keep that unbalanced as long as you can, communicate well with family and non-fighters and friends, and then make sure that you limit how long. If my life is unbalanced for the whole training camp, then say, hey, all right, for 10 weeks, I'm going to be out. I'm MIA, but limit for how long. But if you go fight to fight to fight and you're never leaving a training camp and you're always trying to make that weight, you could do that, but just remember, it's going to take a mental toll, not just a physical toll, but a mental toll as well.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind because when it's unbalanced for too long, people don't live up to their expectations.
In other words, that was a lot of big fancy words. I'll say it like this. There's one scene in my head that I kept playing over and over and over again. It was Keanu Reeves in the Matrix. He's plugged in, he's shaking because he's learning all this cool ass shit. And that's great. You could do that for a while, but eventually you need to unplug. You need to
You
get
need
out
to.
of that
Yes.
and get out of that cave and play
Yes.
some video games for a little bit, watch some
Something.
movies.
Do a
Go,
puzzle, do artwork, go skateboarding,
yeah,
go
like,
out, go hiking.
go play with your daughter in the park. Like you need something out of that because
Uh-huh.
um,
You need
it,
nonviolence.
right. It's like
Yeah.
it's one of those things like you can do it for so long, but eventually, like other things around you are going to begin to like break down and collapse if you're not aware
Correct.
of that.
Yes, and when those breakdowns happen, it's just another brick to put on the back of your neck as a fighter to deal with when on your next training camp.
Yeah,
It's this
exactly.
like lack of communication that can really go down that bad path. Yeah, you're right.
Well, Dr. Tim, it was an absolute honor to have you on my show. We are going to do it again. I'll give you the last word, though. I have a building audience. I have a lot of fighters all around the world that watch this show. If you had like a Dr. Springer, a Jerry Springer final
Oh,
thought, I'd love for you to share that before I let you go.
yeah, appreciate it. A couple of things. There are mental and physical health performance optimization is no joke, and it takes time and effort. And finding that balance, I'm not saying any of this is easy, but fighting isn't easy. Fighting is one of the hardest things I've ever seen in my life. But caring for your mental health is beyond important. It is essential. Your physical body, your physical health is just as important, if not more, or your mind is just as important, if not more so than your physical health. When you find the equilibrium in both of those, you find balance in your life and you communicate your needs well, you can find more success than if you don't, truly. And the more I come on this show and I'm able to offer some of these ideas and critiques, I have some more notes kind of fleshed out I'd love to share with everybody. And I don't have enough time to tell them all, but I do have some big ideas, and I think I could really make a material difference in people's lives, even in just giving advice away. Just I have a ton of experience working with a lot of clients who want similar things that these fighters do. And I'm hoping I could be a resource for your community at Mom's Basement from here into the future, man. Thanks for having me. It was an honor to be here. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Little. We'll have you back very soon.